Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen. Sayyidina wa habibina Abil Qasim Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Wa ala ahli bayt at-tayyibin at-tahirin al-ma'sumin. Sayyama al-Imam al-Mahdi al-Hujja ajjalallahu ta'ala faraj sharif. Please recite a salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Welcome to Spiritual Reawakening through Poetry and Spoken Word. We will start the program with Quran recitation by Dr. Mostafa El-Diwani. Dr. Diwani, please start us off with Quran recitation.
Assalamu alaikum to all.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
So inshallah we'll be reciting verses from the Quran from chapter As-Saffat, verses 98 to 110. And I chose to recite these verses especially because it addresses the story of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam and how he was persecuted for promoting justice and the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there's also a mention of Imam Husayn, although not directly, but we'll get to the verse, and it's the verse وَفَدَيْنَاهُ بِذِبْحٍ عَظِيمٍ. And we all know and learn from the story of Imam Husayn how he upheld justice and was martyred for it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala salutes Ibrahim alayhi salam and all those who are qualified as muhsineen, all those who uphold justice and go by the best way possible. So for the love of Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, salli ala Muhammad. Allahumma
salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فأرادوا به كيدا فجعلناهم الأسفلين. وقال إني ذاهب إلى ربي سيهدين. ربي هب لي من الصالحين. فبشرناه بغلام حليم. فلما بلغ معه السعي قال يا بني إني أرى في المنام أني أذبحك فانظر ماذا ترى. قال يا أبت افعل ما تؤمر ستجدني إن شاء الله من الصابرين. فلما أسلما وتله للجبين وناديناه يا إبراهيم. إبراهيم قد صدقت الرؤيا إنا كذلك نجزي المحسنين إن هذا لهو البلاء المبين وفديناه بذبح عظيم وفديناه بذبح عظيم وتركنا عليه في الآخرين سلام على إبراهيم كذلك نجزي المحسنين آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات على محمد وآل محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Give Allah, Dr. Diwani, for welcome to the program. My name is Dr. Farooq Bandali, and I'm from Taqwa Media.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Komal Zehra and I'm from the Shia Racial Justice Coalition.
Taqwa Media is an Islamic publisher and distributor with the vision of sharing the message of God consciousness one family at a time by promoting Islamic literacy.
The Shia Racial Justice Coalition intends to connect the larger Shia Muslim communities around topics of anti-racism, anti-Blackness, and racial justice. We understand the dire need for collaboration between a broad range of organizations, activists, and our community centers. Today's event, we're hoping to collaborate and unify our efforts with Taqwa Media to create an event around social justice issues and connect it to our core beliefs as Shias.
So the overall purpose for today's event is fourfold. So first, to collaborate and unify with other Muslim organizations. Second, provide a platform for poetry and spoken word expression to ethnically diverse Muslim authors, publishers, and community members, regardless of age. Third, create a virtual safe space for open, real, honest, inclusive, reflective discourse. Fourth, have 2 book launches, one by Sister Laila Hasib. We will have her first book launch, which is Woke and Loud, a faith-based medley of Muslim poetry and spoken word. And second, by Brother Ibrahim Al-Zubeidi, who's from is Tears from Heaven Flowers. We'd like to show the agenda for today for a quick review, such that you can. So you will tell that we'll have poetry. We'll have 1 book launch, series of poetry, and then open discussion, and then the second book launch, and then a third series of poetry, and then an open discussion, and then last remarks. The intention today is to have a discussion for no more than 1.5 hours or 1 hour 45 minutes. So without further ado, we would like to invite the first reciter for today. His name is Ahmad Bandali. Ahmad is 10 years old, from New Jersey, and he will be reciting a poem that's titled The Oath, and it is from the book Tears from Heaven. Ahmad, assalamu alaikum, bismillah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Our oath. With every moment that comes to pass, with every breath before our last, with every tear our cheeks embrace, the divine mercy that we are blessed with, the divine grace. We swear an oath that by the Lord's name we will not forget Husayn. We swear by the moments before Adam approached the tree, by the names he taught the angels, the prophet, and his trustees, by the unified worship before ego engulfed the jinn, by the holy lights purified from sin. We swear that we will never forget Husayn. We swear by the ark built by the hands of Noah, by the creatures that bordered the ark, two of every creation, by he who created them and gave them a soul, by the whispers that protected the ark from the rains of damnation. We swear we will never forget Husayn, the ark of salvation. We swear by the home that was raised by Abraham, by the vision that he saw in his dream, by the blessing given to him when he was old, by a son who submitted to what his father was told. We swear that we will never forget Husayn. We swear by the birth of the prophetic seal, by the message that he came to reveal, by his family that for 3 days gave up their meal, by the sword made from heavenly steel. We swear we will never forget Husayn. We swear by the battles that took place to defend the truth, by the takbirs roared by the lion of Allah at Badr, by the obedient who stayed on the hill at Uhud, by the few who stood strong at Hunayn. We swear we will never forget Husayn. We swear by the hands created by the divine, by the hands that reached Khaybar, by the hands that kissed Haydar, by the hands raised by Zainab. We swear that we will never forget Husayn and the severed hand of Abbas. We swear by the 40th day after Ashura, by the head that was returned to Karbala, by the tears shed when the women visited their martyrs, by their sons, brothers, and fathers. We swear that we will never forget Husayn, the master of martyrs. We swear on that by which there is no other, by he who is from the Prophet, and the Prophet is from him, by the trust given to Abbas on the day of Ali's death, by the veil of Zainab that was under oppression, by the stance made by Husayn against the false succession. We swear that we will never forget Husayn. We swear by the love Laila had for Akbar, by the sandals worn by Qasim, by the soft neck of the youngest martyr, by the eyes of the Prophet's daughter, who bore witness to the slaughter. We swear that we will never forget Husayn, and that we will chant, breathe, and call, by God, O Zehra, we will never forget Husayn. Our oath, O Zehra, we will never forget Husayn. Salawat.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Ahmad, indeed, we make the oath. O Zahra, we will never forget Husayn. Jazakallah for that recipe.
Thank you so much, Ahmad. That was amazing. Next up, I'd like to invite Sister Sasa Akil to recite a poem.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Background, I'm headphones can filter it, but if they don't, please forgive me. So this poem is about basically the recent months and what has happened over them, and how I have taken these events as far as the fight for Black lives and police brutality and just the treatment of Black people, and how I've taken them and how I've found strength in them, and also a drive to continue fighting. So this is called Unto Them. We have been marching for months now, standing and being shot, kicked, pulled down, standing back up and fighting again. We have not lost our conviction. We are still marching and shouting and bleeding and calling and fighting for a thing we know we deserve. It's been too long in coming. It's not here yet, so we are still marching. Still painting, still writing, still shouting, still singing, still printing, still standing, doing the best we can with our paint-stained hands, doing the best we can. We are still breathing, even though it's hard. Even though he couldn't, they couldn't, and don't any longer, we breathe for them. We have been marching for them, and our feet are tired. Our throats are dry. Our fists are sore, but this does not end. Not here, not today or tomorrow or any day except the one where we get what we've been calling for. And this fight may go on for centuries. This fight has gone on for centuries, but we are not afraid, not ever, not today, because if they haven't stopped us by now, then what hope do they have of stopping us at all? And we call the same message in the streets, and our voices bounce off buildings, echoing back our call. We say, Black Lives Matter. And when we pause to take breaths, our echoes fill up the silence. Even the city knows our message by now. Even the concrete knows the names of the fallen. Even the skyscrapers join in. We have been marching and we will not stop. And when the children ask us how our arms and legs got so strong, we will say, by holding hands and marching on, we are not finished. Not today or the next. We have been marching for months and will march for months to come and years from now. The children will ask us who stood against our cause, and we will say, no one of consequence. No one who could make the fire in our blood flow any less fiercely. We are marching today and tomorrow and forever if need be. We are marching and shouting Black Lives Matter until they change, until we win, until my people no longer cry. Until then, this is my war song, my hope, my goal for my kin. Until then, thank you very much.
Wow, mashallah, that was so powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Sister Sasa.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Next up, we have Sister Frishta Bastan. Assalamualaikum.
Salam everyone, thank you so much for having me. I am tuning in from Toronto. It's an honor to be a part of this, so thank you so much for thinking of me. I want to give a disclaimer before I recite that it's incredibly hard to write about Imam Husayn and the Battle of Ashura because I don't think my words can be ever enough to embody or try to describe the honor and the significance of the battle, as well as how important Imam Husayn's legacy and sacrifices have been teachings to me as a Hazara Afghan woman who's constantly fighting for liberation in intersectional spaces. So I do the best that I can to give a tribute to Imam Husayn and his legacy. So I hope that it does resonate, but it is kind of supposed to mirror why and I guess where my teachings come from as a Afghan Hazara woman. So. The sun that set that night of Ashura cried, I paint a painful farewell to you, Ya Aba Abdullah. Those who deny your victory are the ones who belittle the prophecy. I salute the gatekeepers of justice for teaching us it's better to die standing on your feet than on your knees. I salute the sands of Karbala that held up the sorrowful, heavy caravan. I salute the wind that twirled in your defense. Even nature knows tyranny. I salute the water that pushed to expand but was still deny your touch, yet the believers of justice flow like waves rushing to shore when they hear your story, Ya Husayn. There's not a single story, a single love like yours, a love that makes Sufis yearn. How can a love for his beloved be so pure? Thank you.
SubhanAllah. Thank you so much, Sister Frishta. Indeed, we must salute the gatekeepers of justice. Thank you so much for being here and for taking time to share this powerful. So next we will have our first book launch, Woken Loud, a faith-based medley of Muslim poetry and spoken word. So by one of the authors, who is Sister Laila Hasib. Sister Laila is also the editor of Woken Loud. So I'd like to start by introducing Sister Laila to everyone here. So Sister Laila Hasib established Inc. Resistance Islamic Publishing, an Islamic fiction book publishing company for young and new adults in 2017 after retiring from 25 years of teaching, mostly in special ed. She obtained degrees in psychology, criminal justice, and education, is a published author and editor, and worked with Muslim Embassy and the Muslim Community School in and around Washington, D.C., and Crescent International News Magazine. She also was at the Asada Islamic School and a public school in Greater Toronto area. Her storytelling revolves around empowerment, exposure of the political mechanisms that dilute and or take power away, and encouragement of standing up for right as a Muslim and living with integrity. As a Muslim convert of almost 41 years, Sister Laila's identity is completely wrapped around Islam and its values. Narratives and truths are heard within her storytelling. She's especially interested in young Muslim stories of trauma, discrimination, immigration, mental illness, identity, and truth and their survival, growth, power, insights, healing, and compassion. She stays grounded in a world of turbulence by understanding the negative forces behind relationship destruction and oppression of others, an ongoing legacy of spirals and never-ending circles. The healings and truth within the Quran for everything, and the way to love and unify among Muslims of all flavors, places, and persuasions, the only way to be whole and survive. Sister Laila was born in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, has been married to Brother Laila Hasib for 34 years, and they reside in the Toronto area. She's a mother of 5 adults, as well as a grandmother and stepmother. So please welcome Sister Laila with the salawat. Sister Laila, I just want to welcome Sister. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
So as part of the book launch, we thought it would be good if the audience got a chance to hear from you. We wanted to start off with a few questions. And what we're thinking of doing is asking you a couple of questions before inviting you to recite one of your poetry.
Okay,
so,
thank you very much.
You're very welcome. So the first question is, the book in front of us is a compilation of many different spoken word artists. What was your overall purpose and vision for Woken Loud?
Well, I can start by talking about how I came up with the idea. So my daughter Sakina invited me and my husband, her father, to go and hear some spoken word and poetry. And when we heard what the sisters, they were mostly sisters, were saying, we were really excited about it. It was very profound and spiritual. And so I realized that I wanted to start collecting these spoken words and poetry, Muslim poetry, and compiling it together to create a book for mostly the authors, but also for us and for the future. And so I sent a call out and I asked around and actually invited some people that I knew and that Sakina knew and their friends and famous people that are online. And once I started receiving the poems and spoken words, I realized it was way more, the vision was more than just a collection. It was a purpose. The purpose became that what we needed to do was let everyone know that the Muslims were woke and loud, and that they were on the scene, and that they were seeking a higher purpose, and that they were resisting wrongs with moral solutions. I realized that the Muslims needed to know that, our young people, because I'm mostly working with young and new adults, although there are some elders in the book and some younger people, that the Muslims are not absent on the scene. They're not uncaring, they're not scared, and they're not passively responding. But they're actually standing up for the truth and justice, just like all the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructed us to do throughout history, and that they were rising up against injustices like Imam Husayn's Islam's companions and family, and they're saying, no, we will not surrender to tyrants and oppressors. We see you. So some people would say that I saw a need, or they would imagine that I saw a need. The need is that there's a lack of Islamic fiction. they might think I set out to produce a product to fulfill this need, but I never viewed Woken Loud as a product. It's a service. So the book is a service, and everything that I'm doing, all my publishing company is a service, because the young people need and want moral and just and instructive and uplifting Islamic fiction to read. And I'm trying to now broadcast their voices to the world in the service of Allah. Allama Iqbal told us that a poet is like the heart in the breast of a nation. And so the poets and spoken word artists today and all through history have realized that the people sometimes become speechless. And so they decipher the words of the people and speak for them through the poetry. And these are the people that are standing up, and they're not just sitting around and doing nothing. They're fighting against oppression by talking about the unity of Allah, the message of the prophets, Islam, morality, and politics. This old truth versus falsehood. So this anthology of Muslim poets and spoken words became a work of love and resistance and a collection of religious and mystical yearning, ascending lights that show us the disease that's eating away at our souls, as James Baldwin wrote so long ago. These authors were trying to lift our burden by informing us of the truths of who we are and who we should be, and pointing us towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whom we all came from and to whom we all will return. Thanks.
Thank you so much, sister, for not only sharing with us the overall purpose, but also sort of speaking to the idea of how it's a service, and the fact that you've collaborated with 36 different poets, and look at it's 440-page book or so. May Allah reward your efforts throughout to be able to speak out, and be a voice, both from a poetic perspective as well as to jot down word. Thank you so much, sister, for these insights. With that, I would like to now invite you to recite your poem called As If.
Okay, thank you. And I just wanted to say that there's on the website, Ink Resistance Islamic Publishing, there's a link in the menu for Woken Loud, and you can see more about the demographics of the people, the mix. So it's a mix of madhabs, and also there's a link, there's links on there for some of the people that have online performances. So this is the piece I wrote, As If. The Rangers said they'd carried out a controlled burn on December 11th. The charred palm and pine trees gave witness. Researchers discovered how the environment was, say, in 1900, and are trying to make it like that again after letting it go so long. It facilitates good bugs and plants and keeps out bad bugs and plants, foreign ones that don't belong here. As if they just invented a controlled burn, when the original peoples had replenished the soil by clearing the underbrush, allowing new growth and its inhabitants to flourish in less crowded, oxygen-rich, and nutritious environments, a feat done by nature periodically through wildfire caused by lightning. As if they just invented a controlled burn, when they've been warring and massacring others since time began, exterminating the unwanted so they can dominate even in the foreign lands, or especially. As if they just invented a controlled burn, when they've been trashing the environment, cutting and mining, polluting and scorching to grab the resources, fruits, minerals, spices, and oil, to hoard them for when the stolen lands are barren, desertified, and flooded. As if they just invented a controlled burn, when they've been picking and choosing those, quote, good ones to allow in, as brain drains from overseas while silently watching the, quote, bad ones pilfer through leftovers, fight over scraps, and drown in amputated, limb-weary, war-torn anguish egged on by the match holders, as if they just invented a controlled burn. The ranger said last week in the next town, Apalachicola, a private contractor burned down 10 homes, just trailers really, when the burn got out of control, as if that never happens on purpose, all the time, as if they just invented a controlled burn when they'd already dropped and sprayed Agent Orange on Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, so they could see the Viet Cong to kill them better, burning and destroying them, the lush forests, water, air, insects, birds, mammals, and themselves, as if they just invented a controlled burn when they had already let go Little Boy and Fat Man on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the only nuclear attack in history exterminating hundreds of thousands, leaving radiation sickness, cancers, birth defects, and disabilities because some soldiers were blown up in Hawaii. As if they just invented a controlled burn when they've set the inner cities on fire on purpose, and through corralling the people, the quote bad bugs, planted in uninhabitable shacks like unwanted weeds someone accidentally transplanted across the Atlantic until they burn the misery down themselves, as if they just invented a controlled burn, as if they just do it on purpose for good reasons, as if they know what's good, as if they know who belongs here or there, as if the living and property rarely go up in flames except by the unexperienced controlled burners, as if, all the time, controlled burn, as if they're not out of control all the time.
Jazakallah, sister. Thank you so much for your speech, for your poem, and for sharing information about your book. I've posted a link to it in the chat. If anyone wants to check out that link, you can get further information there.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Brother Husayn Ali Jamshidi. Alaikum.
Let me be clear. With purified new intentions, I sing to a concealed queen from the bottom of an inkwell, neglecting my thirst, showering you with praise, and all the scribes' bright oceans. I listen. You are the feminine sun, I am the new moon in the orbit of your shadow, barely visible to the aided eye, dimly lit by earthshine, yearning to rid myself of this middleman and turning towards your illuminating pulse. I hearken. I am Sakina's earring in the hands of an oppressor, hidden in a sham palace, breaking my fast with dirt. So plant me in this desert prison without a burial shroud, to rise when hearts are naked while you remain veiled. I memorize. How can I smile at a reflection if your broken rib was laid to rest in secret? How can I play in your stolen garden if you were half my age, raising the standard? May my mother be your sacrifice. I shall dig your heavenly grave with bare hands, learning to stay silent. I ponder. You have asked for no reward save this, so cleave me asunder with a solitary drop, squeezed from the nectar of your family tree, a seed decreed to expand into mighty date palm, uprooting for the journey to your shrine and refusing shade to non-existent whispers. I submit. In the twilight of this world, I announce the setting of a distance from the top of a temple mount on the eve of Friday, according to your wishes, and begging for everything I don't know. Another request. With nothing to say and less time to lose, let me be clear. Heaven lies under your feet, and I tiptoe in your footprints. Thank you.
Thank Allah, Brother Husayn, for this very, very beautiful recitation. As you were reciting, as I was reflecting upon this poem, there was something else I wanted to share that I think is very befitting when you say, "Let me be clear," especially as it relates to Lady Fatima alayhi salam. Because as we know, in Hadith al-Kitab, which is also a Hadith al-Qudsi, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that they are the household of the Prophet and the assets of prophethood. They are Fatima, his daughter. They are Fatima, his daughter, her husband, and her 2 sons. She serves as the axis of the entire universal leadership. Thank you so much for sharing the lesson here. With that, I'd like to invite Brother Husayn Modjtehedi. We'll be reciting 2 poems. The first is titled "In the Name of God," which he authored, and the second is titled "Change," authored by Baraki or Mawla Muhibbullah. Baraki is not able to recite, so we've asked Brother Husayn to recite. Husayn.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. As Dr. Farooq mentioned, the first piece that I'll be presenting was one that was written by myself some years ago. And the second piece that I will be reciting for you all is from the book Woke and Loud. For those of you who have the book, I believe it's page 29. Without further ado, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I begin in the name of God, who vowed never to break his promises, and he promised to stand with the oppressed and annihilate the oppressors. I begin in the name of God, who promised that an era would come that tyrants would sit on thrones like the queen, but he assured us that the marginalized will have the opportunity to reign supreme. I begin in the name of the Most High, who is there with the destitute in every tear they cry. I begin in the name of the greatest of all, who reminds us that every arrogant despot will fall. I begin in the name of the Most Kind, whose justice is unparalleled in any and every time, who watches over every child in Palestine, who does not let a single crime pass by unnoticed. I begin in the name of the Sublime, who hears every sigh and takes care of the martyrs who have heroically died. I begin in the name of the one who possesses might, who takes the righteous out of darkness and brings them into the light, who puts shade over the heads of the orphans who are stripped of their rights, who protects the victims of inhumanity and takes them to new heights. I begin in the name of the all-seeing Creator, who lets the enemies laugh now, saving the fire for later, rescuing the needy from mortal danger and exposing the puppets and warmongering dictators. I begin in the name of the easily pleased, who put hardship on our path, but with them comes ease. He reminded us that if we put our hands in our pockets, we will find that he has even given us the keys. I begin in his name, that name that gives hope. Divided we fall, so hold on to the rope. I begin in the name of the incomparable. The injustice of this world has become intolerable. Living under this capitalist system is impossible, but I will never bow down because death is more honorable than smiling with my oppressor. I begin in the name of God, the one who is above, who made us into different races and colors and united us with love. I begin in the name of God, the one who taught me to be brave, moral, and to resist, to keep my head up and to steady my fists high in the air, higher than any throne or monarchy. I begin and end in the name of the Lord who promised victory. Thank you. That was the first piece, which was written by myself, which is, I believe, also in Woke and Loud. The second piece by Brother Muhibbullah, who unfortunately is not here with us. My apologies, I mentioned page 29, it's on page 31. Is a piece written by him entitled Change. How do we change an unjust system, an immoral, backward system, a neo-mass incarceration plantation system, a design slavery for profit system justified under the umbrella of punishment, a Jim Crow police brutality lynching system, a system that's steeped in the denigration and inhumane treatment of humanity, a failed moral system that gives birth to white supremacist racism and a white power structure system governed by the state authorities. We must first start with our own willingness to change that within the beast we live in. Change is not a fruit waiting to fall to the ground when ripened, nor is the path to change is paved with rose petals. Change is to be capable to make the fruits fall to the ground. Let your sweat flow like water and water the seeds of the future. Path to change is to be ready to pave it with one's own blood if need be. Change is to remove the distance between oneself and those who sit in the seat power of authorities. Change is to make the impossibility a possibility. True change can't exist without one preferring death over living. Change, 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 change. Please say aloud, salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Indeed, Brother Husayn, we must work towards changing the unjust system. But as you said, we must work on change within ourselves, do the inventory, we must find the change and the unjust within our families, within our communities. That's where change starts. We must do so by asking in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. MashaAllah, thank you for this very beautiful recitation. I would now like to invite Sister Komal for the next 7 to 8 minutes to have sort of a discourse around the poems that we've heard. We just wanted to present sort of a break in having a discussion around these poems. And we'll.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum everyone. So far, I've been noticing some themes in the poems around change. Sister Sasa's poem as well mentioned the importance of change. I'd love to get feedback from the attendees and from the panelists on each other's poems. And if you have any questions that you want to ask the panelists, you can do so now. I'd love to open the floor to others as well. Yeah. We've been getting a lot of feedback in the chat. That's great to hear. Thank you to all the attendees for staying engaged, even though this is like a webinar format.
So I have a question for you, Sister Komal.
Mm-hmm.
Whilst we're waiting for others to potentially engage, one of the ideas for today was to really, it's obviously around education and awareness. How do we take this forward till tomorrow, to the next day, where we are as community members, we are taking time to speak out against injustice.
Can you repeat the question? It cut off a little bit.
What can we do as a community to speak out against injustice?
I think speaking out helps, but before you speak out, make sure that what you're speaking about, you're properly educated from the right sources. It's easy to educate yourself just by Googling and researching, but make sure that the sources that you're looking for are the correct sources, the people who have actually experienced these injustices, if you want to speak on it. That's something that Shia Racial Justice Coalition is trying to attempt to do as well, is get this information from the source and get the perspectives of people who are actually facing these injustices. But yeah, I think poetry is a really beautiful way where people speak on important social justice issues. Poetry, art, it's not just for aesthetics. It's not just because it's soothing to your ears. Sometimes the things you see in art and in poetry might bring out uncomfortable feelings or make you feel unpleasant, but the point is that art and poetry, it's to make you react. And if we don't use this to help people react to what's going on in the world, it just becomes an aesthetic thing.
I think you, that really summarizes the idea that we really, if we're going to do activism, that we need to model around wise activism. I think the first point really, and you stated it, is that we have to adopt an Islamic mindset and find from the learnings and the teachings of the Prophet, the Ahlul Bayt, right? And do so, so take the time to learn through the Prophet, and then learn the issues, and then approach it with lots of responding to question.
I think we have some questions in the Q&A. Sakina, can you read the question?
We actually have an anonymous question for Sister Laila. Someone asked, how did you find a publisher for this kind of work, and how do you distribute it?
Assalamualaikum. Ink Resistance Islamic Publishing is my company, so I'm the publisher of the book, and we have other Islamic fiction books for young and new adults, and we're trying to publish young and new adults. So if you know people that are writing, let them know about us. Distribution is more of an issue, so I sell off of my website. There are some stores, Taqwa Media is selling Woken Loud also, but there are some other stores that you can access either on my website or through Google, that they're selling other books.
Thank you. We actually have a question in the chat as well. Someone, a Sister Mahira asked, is there anywhere to read these poems? Do any of the poets have a page with their poetry? You can find these books on taqwamedia.com, and many of these poets do have various social media pages, which we will be sharing. You can find them in the event page. We will update that as well.
And the poets, feel free to put, you know, your social medias, websites, etc. in the chat. Make sure you address it to all attendees and panelists so that others can see as well. And if people miss out, then we'll make sure to post it on our event page afterwards as well.
If anyone, oh, sorry, go ahead, Halima.
I was going to quickly add that I think the first half of the poems, or the poems that we've heard so far, you know, definitely touch upon the aspects of social justice and racial justice. And I think as Shias, we definitely have an entire framework, an entire theology around justice. And I think, you know, doing this at the time, or during the time of Muharram, which is the most heightened part of our history that, you know, exemplifies justice and exemplifies standing up to injustice, you know, it just really resonates. And I hope, you know, the audience that are tuned in with us tonight, or, you know, this evening, or wherever you are, you know, I hope that these messages also resonate with you all. You know, if you have any sort of comments, you know, any sort of you know, feedback or things like that, we would definitely want to hear, and you can share it in the chat, or raise your hand, or things like that.
Any other questions now that you're seeing either in the chat or in the Q&A?
I don't think we have anything else right now. We will have another quick discussion later on. I think we can move on to our second book launch.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. So our second book launch this evening is Tears of Heaven Flowers by Brother Ibrahim Al-Zubeidi. So many of us are from the Northeast, but Brother Ibrahim, he is in a separate time zone. He's coming all the way from Australia. So welcome, Brother Zubeidi, navigating the time zones here. So I'd like to introduce Brother Zubeidi, Brother Ibrahim, before I invite him to sort of share some of his insights. So he is the head of the Islamic Studies Department at Bayford College in Adelaide, Australia. He is pursuing, studying, and specializing in Islamic pedagogy as part of his master's studies. Alongside being an educator, he writes poetry, with his first book published being Tears from Heaven Flowers. The book was published by Islamic Publishing House in Canada by Sheikh Salim Bimji, who has been in Islamic publishing for a very, very long time and extremely well, a scholar and a publisher and an author himself. And alhamdulillah, I see Sheikh Salim also in attendance here today. Brother Ibrahim often writes at gatherings in hopes of spreading the love for God and the Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. So thank you, Brother Ibrahim, for joining us and being with us here.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for having us. It's an honor to join you all here. And inshallah, that the messages that we spread and share, I guess, nuance the discussion around poetry and help us get closer to the divine, and I guess serve all our works and efforts, inshallah.
So as part of this book launch, we thought we would also like the audience to hear from you. So we have a couple of questions. So the first question that we have for you, we have two questions. So allow me to ask the first question if you respond to it, and then inshallah I'll ask the second question. What was your overall purpose for writing Tears for Heaven's Flower? What need does this anthology, this collection of anthology meet?
Ahsant. It's a good question, and if I was to be totally honest, I didn't have a vision to write the book. I guess it was more like a spark that happened when I was a bit younger. We wanted to write and recite in order to spread the love, give insights into how we see the event of Karbala in particular, in a language that was common to us growing up in the West, as most of the programs were in a language that we might have understood, like being from an Arab background, but we didn't connect the same way we would connect in English. So with that spark, eventually that spark led to a small flame. I ended up throwing a bit more pieces of wood in it, other people threw logs in it. Sheikh Salim, Jazakallah khair to him, he also helped out heaps, and other people. And eventually that spark, the small fire, grew into a bigger one and a bigger one. So it's still living. It's a living tradition. I believe that the poetry in the book is something that will continue to take shape. And then I saw the brother at the start who recited the poetry, Jazakallah. I should stop reciting after that one. That was so good, mashallah. But I think that one of the things that, one of the needs it's serving now is that it provides people material to recite at the majalis that they have to some degree. So if there isn't any poets, although I do urge people to try to get into these spaces if possible, the book does provide a platform to potentially recite and reflect and unite us all on the plains of Karbala. So that's how it sort of came about. Think of it as a spark turned to a small fire, turned to a flame. So that's the purpose, and that's how.
When we got it for the first time, we in the majalis in New Jersey, we used the book for our family did to use different poetry in there. So Taqwa for creating access to that. The next question is, what advice would you give to brothers or sisters who are interested in writing poetry or performing spoken word? People that are new to it.
Ahsantum. Inshallah, well, the other poets could also potentially respond to this from the discussion. But what advice would I would give? I think at the start, expose yourself to the different spaces. So be aware that poetry is something that does exist, and then get connected to people in the spaces and try to understand the purpose it might serve. Some people might see poetry as a way of expressing the unexpressible and to tap into higher realms of knowledge and expressing parts of your soul for other people to, I guess, look into and have an insight. And it does have that power. And as you know, the Ahlul Bayt, alayhim salam, they did invite people to recite, to reflect, to connect in these certain ways. So whatever poetry means and whatever space you are from, it does have potential for that connection and that ability to go beyond just articulating words or going through literature. Anyone starting out, I would say what comes from the heart reaches the heart. So sincerity is going to be really key here. If you write for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, at the end of the day, we try to manifest His names and beautiful qualities, and anything that's about Him is inshallah beautiful. So if you write with that pure heart and that pure intention to say, oh Allah, this is for you and only you, eventually that'll take shape in different ways. And wherever that takes you, inshallah, that can also reach out to others. And I guess, if inshallah, tears is a good, inshallah is a good example of that. And that so long as my intentions don't get corrupt, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will continue the project in ways that inshallah will continue to serve the movement. So keep your heart sincere and pure, and from what comes from the heart reaches the heart. And just, I guess, practically, that sounds very fluffy, I guess, but practically try to find spaces to recite, even if it's just with friends. If you've got the local masjid, local community, it's probably difficult now with COVID situation. So make sure you follow the regulations. But if there is spaces, just read and recite. Eventually you'll realize that you'll keep growing and getting better. So don't be like, it's not good enough. Just start. And then inshallah, eventually you'll keep growing. And by the time that you are, I guess, well known, inshallah, by the people of heaven before the people of earth, you will reach a space where people will be moved and you'll be moved. And that's a humbling process, I think so.
Jazakumullah. You know, the dua that we must all make is, oh Allah, please allow us to be sincere, khalus in everything that we do. And please allow us to identify any time that we see non-sincere thoughts, words, or actions coming, that we correct, self-correct ourselves. We allow each other to serve as a mirror. Jazakumullah for that. And so with that, I'd love to, if you can please recite one of the poetry that you have that's titled First Majlis for Husayn.
Ahsantum. So just before I do recite, what I want us to, the inspiration for this poem, it gives context for us to be able to connect. And it's sort of hard to connect on Zoom, but inshallah, with these limited spaces and being all around the world, we're able to do so. This poem reflects the first majlis, or I envision the first majlis to be something similar to the Holy Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam connecting and expressing the tragedy of Karbala to the Ahlul Bayt. So I want us to go in with that mindset. When we listen to the poetry, imagine yourself, inshallah, we are there with Ahlul Bayt, with the Holy Prophet, remembering Imam Husayn alayhi salam, and we'll start with the salawat. Allahumma salli. Bismillah. The first majlis for Husayn. We remember Husayn. We remember Husayn on the day he stood on the Karbala plain. On the earth, the color of the holy blood that was shed, the sands not yellow, but crimson red. Fatima walks with Husayn in her womb, bathed in mercy and love, but Fatima could not help but hear crying from the heavens above. The moon refuses to set. The moon refuses to set to shelter Fatima and Husayn from the heat of the sun, while the sun lingers in the sky to provide light for Ali ibn Abi Talib's son. Yet on the day of his birth, the sun and the moon rose together to witness the birth of the man whose name is the means to divine forgiveness. Born into the world in the Prophet's arms, Husayn is safe and protected. Yet the Prophet's cheeks taste his tears because he is affected by the great sacrifice in the years to come. Rasulullah turns his face, hiding his tears from Fatima, Husayn's beloved mom. Yet Fatima sees light reflect in the Prophet's beard, a light reflecting from his holy tears. Is Husayn not healthy? Is there something wrong? She fears. The Prophet, holding Husayn close to his chest, with a deep breath, he tells Fatima, Ali and Hassan what will happen to the blessed. He tells them how Husayn and his camp will be oppressed. He tells them of the companions and their bravery, not bending their knee, refusing slavery. He tells them how Habib will bring them to Zainab, swearing to her their loyalty. Wallahi, companions never seen by any royalty. He tells Ali how the companions will fight till their last breath, some undressing their armor, yearning for martyrdom, wishing for death. Rasulullah cries. Rasulullah cries with tears that have never touched his eyes. He looks to Husayn, then to Fatima, but to Ali he cannot bear to see. He tells them of Ali al-Akbar and what will come to be. How once Akbar bids farewell and approaches the battlefield, Husayn will linger behind him, his tears and pain concealed. How Akbar says, I am Ali, the son of Husayn, the son of Ali. I raise my sword to defend the truth, to defend my father. He hesitates to look at Husayn and at Ali, for he comes to know that a spear will hit Akbar's heart as the final blow. Ali looks towards his child and whispers under his breath, how could I pull out the spear tip? How could I see his heavenly blood drip? The Prophet mentions Abbas, the moon of Banu Hashim, the son of Ali, whose face to the enemies would turn grim. Rasulullah tells them how Abbas will protect Zainab until his last breath. Rasulullah tells them what will happen to Abbas before his death. Fatima's heart mourns Abbas, and that is why it is said that on the day when we rise from the dead, she will rise with the hands of Abbas while her tears are being shed. Hassan whispers to Husayn a saying that will always burn, there is no day like your day, O Aba Abdullah, to him we belong and to him we return. Rasulullah holds Husayn dearly. Looking into Husayn's eyes, he sees a sight, the grandchild of the Lady of Light, the suckling child of Husayn, Ali al-Azghar. Husayn begins to cry, for he knows that the Prophet can see an arrow piercing the softest skin under the sky. The Prophet tells them to have patience on that day, for Husayn will stand on the plains of Karbala, looking to his left, looking to his right, crying out to creation to come towards the truth, to come towards the light. Yet the response will be silent. While the five of the cloak mourn, while the five of the cloak mourn, a shadow from their tears is born, an old lady, her hijab torn, whispering as she begins to mourn. Sayyid Zainab to Ali ibn Abi Talib. O Father, when I was young, I sought refuge in your arms from the evil of the world and all of its harms. O Father, for you the sun stood still, but for me the sun rose high as I saw blood rain from the sky. O Father, my soul has had no rest. O Ali, my soul has had no rest. My tears were suppressed as I saw the horses break Husayn's chest. O Father, please hold me again, protect me, comfort me, and ease my pain. Rasulullah's eyes are on his daughter, yet Fatima's eyes are on Husayn. She whispers to him, Nuru Aini ya Husayn, O light of my eyes, O Husayn. The tears of the five sparked a flame that would grow when one hears Husayn's name, a flame in the hearts of the lovers of Husayn, a flame impossible to tame. Fatima had only one question. Fatima had only one question burning in her heart in deep suppression. Who will cry for my Husayn? Fatima had only one question burning in her heart in deep suppression. Who will cry for my Husayn? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Salli ala Ahmad wa ali. Brother Ibrahim, thank you so much for this interesting presentation. Indeed, we are that community created to cry for Husayn. But we cannot just be that community to cry for Hussein. We must also take time to learn what Hussein meant, anchor ourselves to Islamic mindsets. Prophet.
Next, we invite Sister Radia Rashid to recite a poem.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you to the organizers for giving me this opportunity to present. I'm also tuning in from Toronto, so thank you for including me in this panel. Before I begin, I just wanted to mention with regards to Brother Ibrahim's book, I will have a few copies available with me as well in Toronto. So if anyone's in the Toronto area and can't get a hold of it from Taqwa Media, then inshallah you can contact me. You can just message me privately on Zoom or message Tears from Heaven's Flowers on the Instagram page, and inshallah he'll give you my contact as well. The poem I'm about to address is the poem I'm about to read is meant to address social justice from a more spiritual perspective, hopefully outlining what I believe is at the core of the message of Imam Husayn and at the core of our sacred tradition of mourning as Shias. So inshallah, I hope it's beneficial. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Every morning, we wake to the sounds of society's insistence on sleep, convincing us that satisfaction reigns in eat, buy, repeat, and in this emergence of materialist delusions, truth becomes mystified by attachments and illusions. This mist becomes chains, binding our necks to the ill that is complacency, but the world will refuse to seize its oppressive blaze as long as we're not free. Chained by the sorrowful states of superficiality, veiling that which is at the core of humanity, consciousness. You see, Husayn's stand for justice, for moral reformation was only dignified and solidified by its foundation, that for which civilizations of prophets have lived and died, the realization of the self to ultimately find God. For the world's problems are intertwined with our search for the truth. The children of Yemen won't stop dying until we realize how we fit into the grander view. You see, the struggle to fight for change starts with the self. An awakening of the consciousness is a revolution in and of itself. Every day is our own battle when we know what to fight for. A constant struggle when the tyrants inside of us are waging a war, so we mourn. We mourn for the sake of consciousness, the foundation for change. We mourn to fight ignorance. We mourn for the fight to stay awake in a world that profits off of our complacency. We mourn because as long as people suffer, our hearts will not be at ease. Husayn was a man who stood up for the value of consciousness, to show that societies crumble when its citizens stop wanting this. He fought to show that religion is not the opiate of the masses, it is the fuel to the engine of conscious, sincere, and moral action. The world is suffering. Systems are built upon greed, and through injustice, they're maintained. And it'll keep suffering until we realize that connection to our personal inner state. Because beneath the pain lies that one underlying principle, that if humans were conscious, there would be no question about the difference between good and evil. Husayn provides the paradigm for justice and truth, yes, and he is also the representation of how a soul should never rest. The revolution is inside of us. As long as we reflect and as long as we exist, we fight moral tyranny with every breath. So we mourn these days. We are not ashamed. We mourn for mental freedom. We stand in the name of Husayn. We stand in the name of consciousness. We stand to fight for the fight. We mourn to rekindle the flame of that dying light. We grieve to remind people to never stop searching for the truth. We mourn because justice starts with being conscious of everything you do. We mourn because compassion, wisdom, courage are virtues for which we strive. We mourn because their ties to religion is not something we need to hide. Every day is our own battle when we're conscious of why we're here. Justice, truth, and freedom are attained when our connection to the world is clear. So yes, grieve for Husayn. Grieve for the one who is left alone on those blessed plains. But let every drop of salty sorrow remind us of our purpose, our part. And may the message of Husayn awake every sleeping heart. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala
Muhammad.
Thank you, Sister Radia, for that. Indeed, it's our purpose to awaken, and may all our hearts and all of humanity awaken to the message of Imam Husayn alayhi salam.
We'd like to now invite our last reciter for tonight from a perspective. Dr. Mostafa El-Diwani, who's a physician out of Montreal, will be reciting a letter to Imam Husayn.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Thank you so much, and it's an honor to be amongst you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This is a letter to Imam Husayn alayhi salam. Dearest Imam Husayn, I write this through from the gloomy days of a distant land. Lost in the folds of doubtful tomorrow, I seek your counsel, and I need your hand. In trying times of abundant plenty, there's no shortness of dazzling light. Yet roads are spirals and no way to see the clear hand of God and its banners bright. Please come and clear our blind folding gaze so that we may see through this veil of lies. Please do speak and end this deafening noise so that we may at last hear where truth lies. Alas, we utter that we wait and will, with pure tears shed for you, prepare the way for the coming of the one who shall fill the whole world with peace for a brighter day. Dearest Imam Husayn, I do not desire. Dearest Imam Husayn, I don't desire for my letter to end with who betrayed. I sincerely want and dare to aspire to seek your living face and grasp your aid. I do not merely want from you to come into my life and rule and be my king. I do not merely want from you to come into my life to rule and be my king. I want you to empty me and cleanse me from all impurities and to what I cling. Yet Fridays cycle and Muharrams pass, one after the next, and here I remain, afraid to step forward on broken glass, with a decrepit faith and a blinded brain. Dearest Imam Husayn, there is no life if from its core and depth you do not shine. There is no sight, no light, yet only strife if you do not glow in our deepest mine. So raise us to be what he made us for. With your blood revive every one of us, otherwise death, death. Death only will soar through blind hate oozing from wounds of disgust. Yet, how can we despair when God truly fills the vast skies with beauty and earth with love? How can we stagnate when he ever wills for good to dominate all from above? So please pray for us to remain ever firm to your sacrifice and to waste it not. With our loss, while we felt your hand warm our shivering souls and appease its fright. Dearest Imam Husayn, I write this through from the gloomy days of a distant land. Lost in the folds of doubtful tomorrow, I seek your counsel and I need your hand. Thank you.
Tayyib Allah. for this very, very beautiful, soul-piercing recitation. Indeed, we need counsel of Imam Husayn, we need counsel of the Prophet, we need counsel of the Al-Zubeidi, we need counsel of our cult Imam Mahdi. So with that, I like to have the second of the open discussions. I'd like to invite Sister Komal. Just like she had mentioned, the idea is to have for 8 minutes or so, is to have an engagement from an audience perspective. There are things that have touched you. There are things that you would like to. There are things that have touched you. There are things that you would like to share. You have comments. Please do so. We're trying to provide like each audience member a minute or so verbally, or you can also put your stuff.
So if people from the audience, if there is any specific poem or piece that spoke to you, or if you have questions for the poets, feel free to raise your hand. There's a raise your hand feature, and we can unmute you, and then you can ask your question or make your comment. And if you have trouble doing that, let us know.
There's a question.
I like one of the comments that someone has just put. I think it's from Dia Al-Maulawi. A sound achievement of Karbala was that it drew the line between the truth and the lip service by those who take religion for their personal benefits. That's really profound. Thank you for sharing that. I think we have someone who's raised their hand. Let me allow Asia Arastu. You have been unmuted. Or I'm trying to unmute. You can, okay. Yeah, you can speak now.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I just wanted to say all the poems were really powerful, but I liked, I know there was a lot of talk about kind of tying together activism today to Imam Husayn's mission and trying to find the connections. And I found Sister Radia's piece really powerful because of how it connected those two, and how, it kind of took that spiritual perspective on activism and what kind of oppression we are fighting against. Because a lot of times I think we might focus on forms of external oppression that are much more obvious, like political oppression, economic, social oppression. But I think I found her focus on like that oppression of ourselves by kind of being so immersed in a material world. I found that really powerful because I think sometimes we forget about that, internal oppression and that internal struggle that is like at the core of Imam Husayn's movement. So I just wanted to share my thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. If anyone else wants to speak as well, feel free to raise your hands and we can unmute you.
Until we get some more, audience reflection, what Sister Asia has just said is, especially I think resonates with today's climate. We see, uprisings happening across the United States at the moment. We see, a significant spotlight on income inequality in this country. We see it on, the healthcare system. We see a lot of injustices being brought to light at this moment in time. So, for me, this Muharram has especially put a spotlight on these things because, as a Shia, as someone who believes wholeheartedly in the message of Imam Husayn, I think about all of these topics in that lens. So, a lot of what we have seen today and heard today definitely resonates for me as well. I think we have another raised hand from Sister Saman. Gonna let you go.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm not sure how to turn my camera on, but I just wanted to say that I echo Sister Asia's comments and Sister Lima's comments about, how this moment has really woken us up to these links between Imam Husayn and social justice and poetry and the power of poetry. I especially appreciated the final piece the letter to Imam Husayn. And, you know, the more I think about it, the more I feel that all of our efforts, our activism, you know, whenever we speak out, all of those actions are in fact a letter to Imam Husayn, you know, asking for that change that the other brother's poem spoke about. Where's that change, the change that we're all waiting for, and yet, you know, we're calling for something that, you know, is also aspirational. And so maybe we won't see it in our life, but we keep hoping for it. And kind of goes back to our belief in the 12th Imam, and that we are waiting for a change that we're setting up, maybe that we're actively preparing, inshallah. And so I thought like this event and everyone's poetry was so powerful in that regard, and goes back to that quote that Sister Laila mentioned about from Allama Iqbal, about, you know, that nations are born in the hearts of poets. And so inshallah it'll be the poets who will define the philosophy for change. And so I really, really appreciated this. This was a very good event. So jazakallah to everybody.
Thank you very much. I completely agree with the piece that's been resonating with me as well, about how change is not a fruit waiting to fall. I particularly like that line. And I am very glad to see that there are so many different events this Muharram in particular, centering around how we can and how we should be drawing lessons and moving forward. We do have another question for Sister Laila. Sister Asia asked, I know the focus of this session was poetry and how poetry can be used to create awareness about social justice, but I was also curious about your journey in writing fiction for Muslim audiences. Could you talk about your approach to writing fiction and if it's different from your approach to poetry?
That's a hard question. I think I started writing stories, fiction stories about with Muslim characters before I started writing poetry. So the poetry came after my daughter Sakina introduced us to the spoken word and the poetry. They're similar because they are stories. The one I read was a story that actually happened, where the forest ranger had mentioned what he mentioned, and then I just sat down and we were camping and wrote that down immediately. So it's an inspirational, and fiction is like that too. The fiction comes from it's inspired, and you can use real people, you can make it, I write a lot of historical fiction, so real events in my stories. And I'm looking for young people's stories. It can be real events, but it's fictionalized.
Thank you. If anyone has any further questions for Sister Laila, please go ahead. We actually have another question that I believe is directed towards myself, Halima, and Komal. It asks, how connected are the organizers to African American Shias? Are we actively hearing these voices? I am very glad that you asked this. We were actually going to just briefly share some of our past programming. You can actually take a look at our website or other social media accounts. Our first 3 events were with different Black alums, and we actually just ran a social media campaign in the first few days of Muharram, centering a variety of Black voices in the Shia community. All the videos are up on our Facebook account, and inshallah we do have some more programs coming up with in similar tones with other members of the community as well. Sorry, if there's any other questions or commentary, would anyone like to have anything to add?
Can I just mention also that in Woke and Loud, there's also quite a few Black Muslims poems, and also Sheikh Husayn al-Mekki's poems are in the book too. And there's also a couple of native peoples poems in the book that are they're both, I believe they're both Shia Muslims actually.
Sister Laila, that was one of the things that attracted us at Taqwa Media to look at this closely, because it's important that we approach this from an Islamic mindset, but that it's not directed to a particular ethnic group or a particular group and so on and so forth. So it's important that we all do this in the most Islamic manner possible, but yet we are a voice for all humanity in the appropriate context and all of the Al-Bayt, and I found that to be very, very helpful in both.
Right, and also there are two brothers that are in prison that are also represented in the book, and one of them was the brother, the Bareki, that wrote Change, as he has other poems in the book too.
Sister Sakina, any other questions in the chat or the Q&A?
I don't believe so. If anyone would like to raise their hand, please feel free. There is one comment I do really appreciate in the chat from a sister, Dia, I believe. It says the sound achievement of Karbala was that it drew the clear line between the truth and the lip service by those who take religion for their personal benefits. I think that's something that we are all working towards, of course, being on the righteous side, inshallah.
There's a comment that I really I want to make as well, because I think one of the things that historically wasn't as accessible was the idea that we can go after godly knowledge, right? But we have to do so in an unformalized, unstructured manner. And individuals in 2020 and beyond don't need so there is amazing resources that are available online Islamic classes that are conducted by some amazing scholars and their teams. One, for example, that my family and I have been on is the Learning Circle, for example, which led by Dr. Muhammad Ali Shamali. A second one is by IslamicLiteracy.org by Sheikh Ridwan Arastu. And there are many, Sheikh Husayn Kasmali. So for those that really want to get into activism, one of the key areas, in our humble opinion, is to go after godly knowledge. So in a formalized structure, not necessarily going down the road of becoming a scholar today, because once we have knowledge, you can present yourself in a manner that is befitting that we can continue to present ourselves in the best possible light that will make the 12th Imam most happy with our efforts. So I just wanted to sort of share that as we talk about knowledge, we have some amazing platforms that
Salam, and if I may say something as well, I actually have this book conveniently right on my bookshelf called Towards Sacred Activism. It's by Dawood Walid. It's a really good book on putting social justice in a God-centric lens. So this is the book. I just wanted to show you that because I literally just had it right here, so I thought it would be good to show it. But yeah.
Jazakallah for that. Any other comments or questions? So we had intended for this program to end at 7:30. We were concerned that it may go over, but it seems like if there are no other questions or comments at this point, we'd like to finish the last portion of the program with dua and some thank you. You're going to say something.
We actually just got some questions in the chat as well. One is from an anonymous attendee. I'm sorry to cut you off. Just wanted to get to the last question. Any suggestions on how to make these types of practical social justice struggles directly connected to the commemorations of Ashura here in the US and other places? I think as we're doing right now, we've continued having so many different events within the community, not just Taqwa Media, not just SRJC. We ourselves have been in attendance to a variety of speakers. Their ushras themselves were touching on so many topics Alhamdulillah, that is one thing that we have seen really take off in the community, and that we're really beginning to engage with how we also fit into the larger community, not just the Muslim world or not just the Shia world. I think that it's just a matter of continuing in those efforts and keeping in mind why we're doing what we're doing, who our role models are, what lessons that we look to.
Something to add real quick, Sakina. One thing that I heard just recently on a recent discussion that really tied together not only Ashura, but the struggle that the Ahlul Bayt and the Imams faced in their lifetime, that a lot of them were persecuted, they were put in jail, imprisoned, and things like that. And I think there are a lot of parallels in terms of the incarceration system here in the United States, in terms of what is just and all of that. So I think there's definitely ways that the Shia theology, the Shia school of thought, the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt that I think can be very much applied to the social justice struggles that we see in the United States, across the world. And that's definitely something that at Shia Racial Justice Coalition, we will continue to highlight, raising, different Black activists, alims, scholars, and things like that to share their expertise on that. So definitely keep an eye out for our future programming on that.
Yeah, I'd like to sort of add to this, and I think we're talking about connection here. And I think this is entirely an Islamic principle. The way to build connection is at grassroots levels. So one, spend the time to get to know your family, yourself, your family, your neighbors, and then work locally. I think there was a scholar, Sayyid Jafri, that once said, work local, think global, but work within your own local communities and do everything in your power to build relationships, because it is at this local level that once you build these relationships, that it can then help to promote justice and combat. There was another question I think that was asking, can you share? They were asking, can I share the platforms? And sure, there are numerous platforms, but the ones that my family and we have engaged with over the last 8 years or so include kawthar.org, KAWTHAR.org. I'll try and type it in the chat. The other one is Islamic-literacy.org. The third is Academy of Learning Islam. And each one of these is led by a scholar who spent a lot of time, and they approach things in a very methodical, very systematic manner. And each one of these platforms has unique offerings that don't necessarily. It's available in sort of different based on the resource and time and so on. Okay, Sister Sakina, or if there's nobody else on the chat or the Q&A, I'd like to end with a dua and then final remarks and thank you. So one of the things that I have learned over the last 10 years or so is that when we make a dua, so part of us making that dua is the fact that we need to work on manifesting that dua. We need to put the energy. And the other portion of a dua is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will grant us, the tawfiq that comes. And when I was growing up, I just thought that I make dua, oh Allah, I want food, now He's going to give me food. But in reality, that is not the case. I have to go and work. The same way, the best kinds of du'as are the spiritual kinds of du'as. Because if we can identify our spiritual illnesses, we can work through them and build spiritual health that will help with our intellectual, emotional, social, and the relationships that we have with ourselves, with our family. With that, please recite a salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad wa ajil faraj. Oh Allah, thank you for providing us with the tawfiq, that is the knowledge, the power, and the desire to gather today to learn about social justice and honor the message of Imam Husayn. Oh Allah, there is so much injustice and oppression across the world. Oh Allah, please guide us to recognize all of these injustices. But has been shared on this platform, please help us look inward and allow us to identify our own weaknesses and flaws where we are promoting injustice and oppression within ourselves, our family, community. Oh Allah, please allow us to start or continue to appropriately and wisely speak out against oppression and injustice using the principles of Islam as taught to us by the Holy Prophet and the Ahl-Bayt al-Islam. Oh Allah, guide us such that we can take time to learn about our souls and we can do so in a methodical manner. Oh Allah, we know gaining godly knowledge is the most important thing to do, more important than being a father or a mother, professional, a student, and that gaining knowledge is the most important, and then putting that into practice. Oh Allah, the Holy Prophet had once said to Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam, as we heard, that there will be a community that will cry for Husayn. Oh Allah, allow us to take the time to be able to think, to know our thoughts, our words, and our actions, so that they're in alignment with the teachings of the Holy Prophet and the Ahl-Bayt. Oh Allah, help us to continue to develop our different kinds of virtues, virtue of honesty, patience, understanding, respect, and love, and speaking out, so that we can get closer to you and also develop this deep closeness with all of your creation. Please recite Allah. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. So from the last remarks and a closing perspective, we would like to thank, and we know it will be impossible to do justice to this. However, we first start off by thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the opportunity to be here. Second of all, we want to thank you all the attendees to come here and to participate in all the sharing that has happened. We also want to thank all the reciters that are listed here in front of you, and for all the hard work that has gone through for them to be able to write. We also want to take the time to thank all the co-collaborators on the next slide. Alhamdulillah, there was 14 co-collaborators with the idea of trying to unify. We also wanted to take time to thank Sister Laila and Brother Ibrahim for the books that they have published and to help create access and the work that they do. As Taqwa Media, we want to thank Sisters Komal, Sakina, and Halima. We would have not been able to do this without their tireless efforts and dedication. A special shout out to my very brother and friend, Brother Muhammad Ali Naqvi. It all started off with me jumping on a call with him and asking him, hey, what do you think of the idea? Before we end, we wanted to take a poll and see if you all can answer this question. Would you be interested in another virtual spoken word event like this, or another kind of such event? I think there are approximately 47 attendees, so I'm not, we can close it down in 10 seconds or so. Alhamdulillah, it seems like many are interested in this, and so that sort of motivates us and inspires us to continue to work in this regard. This time when we're still dealing with the pandemic, one of the du'as obviously is there are many people that are sick, that are not well, and need our du'as. Many have passed away as a result of COVID, but there are also many marhum. So as I end, I ask you to please recite a salawat and for the benefit of all the marhum, and also another salawat for the benefit of the 12th Imam, and also recite Fatiha on our marhum who have passed away. And with that, I would end with say, wa akhiru dawan and alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Assalamu alaikum.